Hey friends, really quick before we get into this interview. Rachel is the CEO and co-founder of Virtual Sapiens, an amazing AI-based platform for improving your communication. We are now official partners. Everyone who joins my one-to-one program will get full access to the premium version of Virtual Sapiens. This includes guides, practice, and detailed feedback on how you communicate across 16 different categories, all of which has been proven based on neuroscience to improve your communication and make better impressions on people. If that sounds interesting, I got more information in the description, and enjoy the interview. Rachel, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you being here and excited for you to share more about your background and this awesome product that you've developed.
Absolutely, Grant. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to answer any questions you have.
Great. So to start, can you tell people more about your background and your now company, Virtual Sapiens?
Yes, absolutely. So my earlier background professionally, I used to be a professional ballet dancer, danced with Boston Ballet for 10 years. And that might seem like a crazy leap to now be the CEO of an AI company, but actually there's a thread. And the thread is actually nonverbal communication and expression. So for anyone who's seen a ballet performance, you know that dancers don't speak on stage, right? It's all in the way that they move their bodies and their facial expressions. That's how you communicate these elaborate storylines.
Yeah.
Characters, right? And so I did that for 10 years professionally, retired, and then realized in my first role, I was fundraising at Harvard. I realized that actually nonverbals and presence and body language are still very important in these less performative roles, or at least less performative relative to certainly dancing on stage. And so I was fascinated by that. And I spent a good amount of time studying nonverbal communication as a science, so that loops in anthropology and neuroscience and understanding perception and really fascinating things like that. And I started coaching people in nonverbal communication, body language, and presence, more like one-on-one, similar to what you do, and at least in the format, and like workshops, and loved that. But then the pandemic happened, and video became the main channel that people were communicating over. And that I thought was both a challenge in the sense that communicating over video can be awkward and tough and feel weird.
Sure.
For a lot of people. But also an opportunity in that, I knew enough about some of these emerging technologies to know that if you use AI in certain ways and computer vision, you can actually understand, like it can analyze people's behaviors and give feedback based on certain rules. So that was the initial idea behind Virtual Sapiens. And, that was about 4.5 years ago. And so, now here we are today, still alive and, doing well.
That is fantastic. Way to not only pivot your career, but also adapt to something that I'm sure was very challenging initially when the pandemic happened and a lot of that face-to-face coaching kind of went away.
Lots of people have to, and especially I think over the pandemic, a lot of people had to reinvent themselves to an extent, or reinvent a part of themselves, and so transitions can be hard, but they can also be very surprising in a good way.
Very true. Yeah. So for people who aren't super well versed in this topic, what are the differences between verbal and nonverbal communication?
Great question. So I like to think about communication as a three-pronged form of expression, right?
Okay.
And so under communication, you have verbal, which is everything word choice. You have vocal, which is the way words are delivered. So that would be how fast you're talking, intonation, right? Are you monotonous? Do you have nice vocal inflection? Are you going up at the end of every sentence? Right?
Yeah.
And then, so that's like vocal. So it's related to words, but it's not the actual meaning of the words. It's how the words are delivered, right? The emotional nuance that go into how you're forming these words.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the body language aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that vocal and body language together make up this umbrella of nonverbal communication, right? Because vocal is not verbal, it's not words, right? It's vocal, it's coming out as delivery and nuance, and body language also is not words, it's coming out in posture and eye gaze and facial expressions and hand gestures.
Sure.
So nonverbal can be used to refer to that spectrum of behaviors. And so in that sense, it's really elaborate, because while we tend to spend a lot of time thinking about what am I going to say, we should be spending just as much time thinking about how are we going to say what we want to say? How are we going to show up physically? How are we going to deliver our words vocally?
That is awesome what you just said there. Because I think the focus on what am I gonna say, that is even more true with non-native English speakers.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that's interesting. I mean, I'm curious to hear more about that.
yeah. I think when it comes to teaching English and a lot of English learning classrooms, so much of it is based on learning grammar rules, learning new vocabulary words, expanding kind of your academic knowledge of the language. And I believe that a couple of the reasons it's like that is one, it's very easy to teach.
Mm.
You don't need a lot of talent to just regurgitate dictionary definitions of words to people, but also it's very easy for the students to feel like they're making progress because, they could say, oh, well, I memorized 10 words this week. I must be improving. I'm going to keep paying this academy money. Whereas the nonverbals, it's a it's a much higher level of communication, even though it's almost more basic in a way. And so that was what really attracted me to you and to your company, is that I think you are focusing on something that is so often ignored
Mm.
for a lot of non-native English speakers, but it's a skill that they would very, very benefit from improving.
That's interesting. I mean, we see that a lot of times coaching around body language and nonverbals is focused around like the presentation use case, right? I'm about to give a big presentation or a keynote, and I really, I want to make sure that everything's intentional and choreographed. And that's like great. Of course, I totally understand and support that. But there's something to be said for developing a deeper layer of self-awareness of how you show up in any conversation, right? Whether it's an in-person conversation or a conversation over video, and just being aware of the behaviors you have, your own habits, and understanding whether or not those habits are supporting you as a communicator. What often happens is, again, because this whole like nonverbal side of things is often ignored, people have pretty serious blind spots. And they have no idea that like, the fact that they're like constantly fixing things or fiddling with earrings or whatever, like little are actually sending a message to their audience that they're maybe not as confident or composed or calm as they really should be, given the role that they're interviewing for, right?
Very, very true. So you kind of touched on this already, but for the audience that's thinking, well, I've never even thought about my nonverbal communication. Why should I improve this? What are some benefits in terms of your performance, in terms of how people perceive you, that will come with getting better in this area of communication?
Yeah. So the funny thing is that whether people realize it or not, like you're always sending a message. You're always communicating something, right? If you think
Love
about,
that. Yeah.
right, like the moment you join a virtual call, people pick up on these little cues and messages that you provide them visually before you've even said hello, right? And virtually, that's like your background. What are you wearing? How is your lighting? How are you
Mm-hmm.
framed?
Mm-hmm.
When you join the call, are you, upright and open with your posture and looking into the lens, or are you, fiddling around with things
Oh,
and
that's
like,
so true. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
like moving your, like whatever, moving your camera around to like get
Mm-hmm.
the right
Mm-hmm.
spot. Like, how prepared are you for this call? Um, if you're interviewing or you're competing for a job and it's a competitive job market, which we know it is,
Oh yeah.
those messages are so powerful. And if you can show up and show someone that you have an incredible amount of self-awareness, that you have made very intentional decisions to support who you are as a professional, all of those things are going to come initially from nonverbals. While the conversation is going, that's when some of those little like nonverbal habits might interrupt the message that you're trying to send, right? For example,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if I'm supposed to be listening to you, right? Like, communication isn't just about you talking, it's also about the way you listen
Sure.
and participate as a listener. And if the interviewer is sharing something with you or asking you a question, and you're not showing up as an engaged listener, it affects rapport building, right? It
Mm-hmm.
affects trust. And so, you want to be thoughtful about how you're showing up while you're speaking, but also how you're showing up as a listener. And I think virtually that's really hard because, you know, it feels like you're just talking to a screen and listening to a screen. And so it's very easy to
Yeah, yeah.
engage, very easy to disengage, or it's very easy to have a setup wherein, you and I talked about this, Grant, where like, maybe you have your person here. And so you're like, this is great. Like, I feel really connected to you. But the lens is there. And so this person's perspective is the lens. And so what you've
Yes.
done is you've just forced the other person to spend mental energy telling themselves, probably they have a setup and my video is probably on another screen and the camera is probably somewhere else. But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
again, like a
Mm-hmm.
limited meeting period, that's the last thing you want people spending their time thinking about,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So it's like these tiny, seemingly tiny details are actually so powerful
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when it comes to connection.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are so many of those tiny details that I am sure add up and can make a very big difference in the overall impression that you create.
Yeah. And that's why, when you're in the platform, we spent a lot of time thinking about how we could present these metrics and how we can
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
help people understand their meaning, right? Because like not a lot of people understand nonverbal communication, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like we all intuitively pick up on it, but understanding the science behind it and like, oh, why should I care about hand gestures or whatever, like that takes some research so we can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, like, as anyone will see when they try out the platform, like authority impression is about filler words. It's about how much are you repeating yourself. It's about your
Mm-hmm.
posture. It's about where you're looking. It's about if you're touching your face in a variety of different ways, right? It's about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we try to contextualize metrics under these categories like perceived trustworthiness and rapport or energy and expression, and let someone know like, oh, if your energy and expression score was lower than you wanted it to be, it could be that you're not engaging with your face,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's an area you could work on, right? And it's not about smiling more, it's about understanding, oh, okay, like at rest my face is in this one expression and I'm not changing it when someone shares something with me, or when I get excited I'm staying very monotone, or it's a
Mm-hmm.
older
Yeah,
decision you can
yeah.
make, but it's hard to change anything if you're not aware.
That's awesome. There's so much of what you just said there that I see in my classes fairly often. So that's great that you're touching on it directly. Maybe can you just kind of walk through what the experience of getting your communication evaluated on Virtual Sapiens is like?
Totally. So the platform is designed to be fun and engaging.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have our presence portal is kind of where you arrive when you've activated your account. And we have a number of different ways you can interact with our product. The
Hmm.
video Q&A is one of the options, and it's a great way to just get a baseline assessment of how you're showing up as a communicator, as a speaker, as a listener. You don't have to prepare any content because we actually have preset, pre-recorded videos.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so it's just me. I recorded like a number of questions. They're very approachable. Like, what is your favorite hobby? What are your communication strengths and challenges?
Hmm.
It's meant to not be intimidating.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and then you just go through those 3 questions and answers as naturally as possible, and then you will get this super comprehensive report of these different behaviors that I mentioned, right? We analyze what you say, but we also, of course, analyze all those nonverbal behaviors. And that's like considered your baseline, right? And from there, you can do enough. Like we have a series of questions, they change over time. So you can go back in and try another one and see, okay, maybe this time I'll use some hand gestures, or I'll change my framing, or you can try different changes of behavior and see how it impacts your score. You can also try, there are other formats that you can interact with the AI as well. Let's say you did have an elevator pitch, like a 15-second elevator pitch that you wanted to nail. Like you could run through that through what we call our practice mirror. Right.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's not a conversation. You just have to practice your material. Maybe you have a 40-minute presentation, like that would be the practice mirror, right? Similar
Hmm.
to like
Hmm.
practicing in front of your bathroom mirror, except your bathroom mirror is supercharged with AI,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
then we have
Hmm.
the AI role play as well, which is a little more advanced in the sense that, the AI will be your conversation partner and will react and change depending on what you say. So that
Hmm. Hmm.
one's really, really like, so if you were at a point where you were like, okay, I feel really good and I want to practice a job interview, and I like my next session with Grant is like a week from now, and I want to just get a few reps in, right? Like
Yeah,
that would be
yeah.
the perfect way to go through a few job interview role plays. It's actually an option, job interview. You can tell the AI what role you're interviewing for at what company, and the AI will interview you. Um, and that's also like a very powerful way to use the platform.
That is awesome. So you get everything from just a basic casual conversation to a serious professional two-way conversation, and then something where maybe you're just presenting one way.
Yep.
So whatever type of communication you're doing professionally, this platform, you're going to be able to have extremely realistic practice with it.
Yep.
And where does this feedback come from? What is it based on studies? Is it based on your own experience as a coach? How did you develop the framework for evaluating and helping people improve?
So every metric that we've developed and the way it scores and the scoring thresholds are vetted against peer-reviewed research. That research again is either it's mostly led by different academic parties who again like are taking an interest from a psychological perspective or anthropology to a certain degree, neuroscience. But psychology tends to be a leader in this field. And then um, one of our advisors is a PhD in behavioral science, and she vets everything as well to make sure everything
Mhm,
is
mhm,
reasonable within the confines of communication, right? And communication best practices.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and that forms the basis of the way our AI looks for behaviors, or and what it determines as like good versus needs improvement. And so that kind of takes care of that. And then the other part that was really fascinating, that was more kind of I would say like a play between user feedback and then my experience as a coach, is how the feedback is delivered,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
When we started, there was like a big question behind like like how should the AI present the feedback? Because
Mhm.
no one no one wants certainly no one wants the AI to come across as like mean or judgmental.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't want the feedback to make people feel badly about
Sure, sure.
themselves. Um, and but it has to be personalized and it has to be helpful and it has to be relevant, right? So it's like, how do we get specific about the feedback and have the feedback be personal without being like overly prescriptive in terms of telling someone how they should behave, right? So my
Mhm.
example
Mhm.
earlier of facial expressions, right? So the AI is analyzing how you're varying your face, your facial
Mhm.
expressions.
Mhm.
And so it will show you a graph at the end of your presentation or your conversation, and it'll say
Mhm.
you had like a medium amount of facial expression variation. And you can say,
Mhm.
great, that's what was appropriate for that conversation. Or you can say, oh,
Mhm.
really? Okay. I thought I was like really
Super animated.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But like that was like a really energizing call. Like maybe I need to be a little more free with my expressions, right? And but that's
Mhm.
up to the
Mhm.
user. Like that, and that's where like a user might use the platform and then talk to their coach about it and say like, oh, Virtual Sapiens mentioned that I don't use hand gestures at all. But I don't know like how to incorporate hand gestures naturally. So like maybe we can
Mhm.
work on that,
Mhm.
right? And then it can become a conversation.
That is great because, like you said, you don't necessarily need or should show up the exact same for every conversation ever. So there's some evaluation there. There's some really good feedback videos. I thought the videos you made were fantastic. And it's not exactly forcing you to act a certain way, but it's just showing you how you come across and giving you a more authentic, objective look at how people are perceiving you in ways that you might not even realize.
Totally. And I mean, in a nutshell, that's what it's about.
Hmm. Fantastic. Well, Rachel, where can people follow you, can learn more about you?
LinkedIn is probably a great place to find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. We
Mm-hmm.
post a lot of our product updates and stuff on LinkedIn. And then virtualsapiens.co, so co is where you can
Hmm.
go to find out more about Virtual Sapiens. And we do have a free trial. It's pretty limited, but if anyone wanted to
Hmm.
go on and just like see what it's like lightly, that's a nice thing.
Sure, sure. Awesome. Well, I will plug all of Rachel's information below. If you're interested in communication at all, if you're a young entrepreneur wanting to learn and be inspired by someone who's actually doing it, she would be an amazing person to follow. And Rachel, thank you so much for your time. I am so excited about this partnership and moving forward with you.
Same too. Me too. Thanks, Grant.